Great, we are on, and you never quite know when you start these webinar things whether or not there's anybody on the other end of the line or not, but I can see we've got a good number of people that have joined. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our very first Wellcome Discovery Research webinar. I'm Michael Dunn, I'm the Director of Discovery Research, and I'm joined today by several of the Discovery team at Wellcome. It's really great, genuinely, to be able to reach out in this way, both to people who are familiar with Wellcome, but also we very much hope to people who are less familiar with us and might be thinking about applying to us for the very first time. This is the first in what we hope will be a much more regular sort of series of news and information which will be coming out about our plans, our schemes, and how we want to work with you. Before we get going with the webinar proper, I'm going to hand over to Thomas Bray, who's going to talk us through some housekeeping and do some other introductions for us. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, so as Michael said, first I'll be introducing the other members of our webinar and then giving some housekeeping. I'm Thomas Bray. I work in the Discovery Research team. I work particularly with research in the arts, humanities and social sciences, and I'm interested in issues of research culture, especially that early career researcher stage. I'm going to pass over to my colleague Morag.
Hello, I'm Morag Foreman and I'm part of the Discovery Research team. I'm interested in team-based and interdisciplinary research. Maya.
Hi everyone, I'm Maya Warburg. I'm a senior research manager in the Discovery Research team and I work with a lot of different initiatives, but especially in the directed activities team. Luigi.
Hello everyone, I'm Luigi and I'm senior research manager in the Discovery Research team. I'm specifically interested in the early mid-career research portfolio and I work with a number of grantees and activities of molecular sciences.
Thank you. So with the introductions done, I'm going to do some digital housekeeping. This is just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded and will later be shared. Participants will not be visible on screen and they'll be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you're experiencing low bandwidth, then you can use the settings button to select the low bandwidth option. This is set out in the joining instructions for the meeting invite. This does mean you'll only receive the presentation and the audio. You won't get the video feed, but it might help you if you're having some technical issues. Closed captions are available for this meeting, and if you'd like them, there's a button in the bottom left corner which says CC, and you can use the settings button to turn this on. We're hoping for lots of questions over the course of the webinar. The meeting chat is turned off. If you want to raise questions to us, then please use the Q&A function. I'm going to try to answer as many of those questions as we can over the time that we have. Some may be answered in the webinar. You can upvote the questions that you think are most important if you see them raised. Do be aware that if we can't answer all questions, we're taking all of them into consideration, definitely all part of our thinking. And finally, there is a slider at the bottom of the screen that will help you change the ratio. So if the presentation is too big, or indeed if our faces are too big, you can rearrange that ratio. Right, without further ado, I'm going to hand back to Michael Dunn to give a presentation.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thanks very much, team. And you can minimise my face if you want. That might be more acceptable for people. But so on to the kind of the main kind of meat of the webinar now. So I think it's fair to say that Wellcome, we've been going through quite a period of change and quite a period of introspection as we've been developing our new strategy. And part of that has kind of been a major reorganisation as well. So I think fundamentally it's meant that we've been much less visible than we would have liked to have been, but we are now emerging from this and re-engaging with the wider research community. Over the last few weeks, it's been really great to be able to get out and about again and visit some of the universities and kind of hear the kind of questions and concerns that people have about our new plans and our new strategy. But it's really important for us to reach as many people as possible. So therefore, that's kind of one of the reasons why we're running this webinar, and it's also why we're going to be sharing the webinar afterwards, so that people who are not able to join today will be able to listen later. So the plan today, sorry, next slide, please. The plan today is to share with you more about discovery research, what it's all about, what we're trying to achieve, and we also want to directly address some of the important questions or confusions that have been surfacing, and certainly that I've been hearing when we've been going out on visits. So hopefully a little bit of myth busting as well. But also we really want this to be the start of an ongoing conversation with you, the research community, where we can find out how to support you better and your ideas, but also how you can bring ideas back to us for things where Wellcome might want to kind of focus or be able to make a difference. So next slide, please. I'm sure you've all read diligently the new Wellcome strategy, and that new Wellcome strategy has support for science at its very heart. And as part of that, we're really committed to two different but complementary approaches, which we think are going to have the greatest impact on human health. The first, discovery research, and the second, health challenge-led research. And then specifically for Wellcome, this is mental health, climate and health, and infection. And at Wellcome, these four areas come together to form something we call research programs, led by Cheryl Moore, which aims to kind of integrate across all of these four areas so that hopefully we create a portfolio which is much greater than the sum of its parts. Discovery research is a really fundamental bedrock of this of research programs. It remains a very substantial investment from Wellcome into research. And it is also very different to the health challenge areas. Health challenge areas have very specific targets within quite refined and defined remits to achieve impact over reasonably short timeframes. Discovery is not challenge focused. It's all about long-term blue skies research where we haven't specified any particular target endpoints. Alongside discovery research and the health challenges is our really important commitment to trying to improve research culture and diversity and inclusion. That's something we're trying to embed in everything that we do. It's really our desire to make sure that science is open to everyone and that experiments are designed with diversity and inclusion in mind. I think it's fair to say that our funding in the past has not always reached as widely as it could have, and we want to fix that. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn now specifically to discovery research, which I hope you're all really very enthusiastic about because it's the area that I'm responsible for. And we know that fundamental curiosity-based research has the potential to change the way we understand life, health, and well-being. It's a very inherently risky activity. It takes time, and the link to health can take a long time. Wellcome itself, we've had a really long and rich track record of supporting fundamental discovery, and really, that's not changing. And at a time when many other funders are seeking near-term health impacts from their research funding, we are making a very bold commitment to support a broad foundation of discovery research in search of those unanticipated benefits which come from that. We want the research that we support to challenge dogma, open up new fields of research, and embrace big, bold questions. We want to support field opening, field building, and field shaping research. So what's different in terms of what we've done in the past? Well, I think I want to highlight here that we're not turning our back on all of the things that we've supported in the past and the kinds of science and research areas that we supported, but we really want to broaden our remit. Because we acknowledge that there are many other disciplines and areas that can really contribute significantly to our understanding of life, health, and well-being that may never have ever thought about coming to Wellcome for support before. I also want to kind of make the point here that tools and technologies is something I think we've oftentimes struggled to support, and we know that these can be hugely important in transforming fields of research, and we really want to kind of also be able to support people who are working on tool and technology development. We are, as I say, really committed to a substantial budget for discovery research, and in this financial year, we anticipate spending about 350 million on discovery. Next slide, please. Very simply put, And hopefully this is kind of, if somebody says to you, well, what's discovery research welcome all about, we've got really two fundamental goals. First is to fund creative, ambitious, high quality and transformative discovery research. And the second is to create catalytic environments for research through investment in tools, technologies, methodologies, and enabling platforms. And of course, wrapping around all of that is our support and enthusiasm behind creating that positive research environment and research culture. Next slide, please. So how are we going to deliver on these two goals? We've kind of defined two strands of activity. First is our open mode schemes, and the second are directed funding, directed activities. Really central to our strategy and how we're going to deliver on it is our three open mode schemes, each one targeted at specific stages of career, but all three schemes have some common aspects. One important one being that they are open to the full disciplinary breadth, but really importantly, we want to encourage people to be able to take risks and ask really big questions and not be limited by short-term thinking and the usual grant cycle. So we are actually increasing the length of all of the awards that we are offering across the three schemes. I'm going to move on specifically to kind of what we're trying to aim for with these three schemes in a little bit. But I want to kind of turn maybe at this point to directed activities, which you may not have heard so much about. But this is really where Wellcome can act directly to solve particular bottlenecks or barriers that might be presented within particular fields. And there might be different ways we might do this. Some of it might be through very significant investments in places like institutes such as the Sanger or the Sainsbury Wellcome Centre or the Crick. Sometimes it might be through underpinning capabilities like UK Biobank or Diamond Synchrotron. But it might also be, more targeted approaches where we might want to be thinking about bringing communities together, where we might see an intersection between different disciplines, where we think that might be ripe for exploitation. So that's kind of really about, bringing researchers together to try to sort of figure out new ways of doing things. So the really kind of important point to make here is that both the open mode and the directed streams are mechanisms of funding. But actually, what we really want to do is add a lot more value to what we're doing than just funding, although funding is super important. And that really means connecting researchers together, encouraging collaboration, convening workshops, and really sort of trying to make sure that we're catalyzing progress in a way that might not have happened otherwise. So next slide, please. I'm just going to quickly kind of focus on our schemes, and I know that this particular webinar is focusing on kind of like the earlier stages of our career schemes. So I'll maybe focus a little bit more on the ECA and the CDAs here. Just to kind of point out, and I'm sure you all know this, but the ECA and the CDA scheme information, these schemes are live. All of the information is available on the website. And please do kind of make sure you kind of like check all of the relevant information. But here I really want to kind of really maybe focus on what we're trying to achieve with these. So for the Early Career Award, the purpose is for early career researchers, normally within 3 years of their PhD, although that can be different in different disciplines, to develop their research independence. So by the end of their award, we would have expected somebody to advanced understanding in their field, maybe defined and redeveloped their research approach, demonstrated some potential to be a leader in their chosen field or sector, and also kind of gain the skills to develop, manage and lead their own research program. And part of that, of course, is really important in developing an understanding of how to complete research responsibly and promote a positive and inclusive research culture. So by the end of the award, they should be well placed to be able to thrive in their next career step. For the Career Development Awards, these are for researchers who are then now ready to lead substantive independent research programs. The aim is to support researchers with leadership potential to develop their research and leadership skills to be able to successfully run a complex research program. And by the end of that award, we would expect the researcher to be leading an internationally competitive research programme, having made significant contributions to their field, developed their research and leadership skills, so that they can be a leader in their chosen area of research, and also developed an ability to promote and sustain positive, inclusive research culture with their teams. Some questions related to both the early career and the career development awards have been kind of like submitted through the Slido and will be dealt with in the Q&A session in a little bit. Next slide, please. So I really wanted to touch on the discovery research remit. Discovery is, as I said, intentionally broad. We really want to bring in a wide range of disciplines to participate in the health space. So we'll be, we wanted to support everything from fundamental molecular biology right through to clinical and social science. But also we want to reach disciplines which may have never considered applying to Wellcome before. That's kind of the physicists and engineers who can really bring important new perspectives to problems. I really wanted to kind of make an important point, I think, which I've certainly heard a lot of confusion about out and about, and that's really that discovery research. We will not fund purely translational research. Most of our translational work will be solely focused on our challenge areas. That being said, we remain absolutely committed to continuing to support clinical research and clinical researchers. So things like experimental medicine studies, you should have no doubt that those things remain absolutely in remit. I think it's also really important to say and make the point that there will be discovery research that will take place in our health challenge areas. Those are likely to be quite specific and defined on particular problems or barriers that the health challenges have identified. But really to make the point here that if you're working on mental health research or if you're working on climate research, you are still able to apply for discovery research schemes. This doesn't mean that you get a better chance of funding through the discovery research schemes, but I guess I'm making the point that we are open across the full remit to really great ideas. And then finally, the last slide from me is really how to get in touch. So we do want to hear from you. For strategic discussions with the Discovery Research team, we have a Discovery Research inbox, and we would ask people to use that if they're interested in coming to us, talk about areas which might be of interest in terms of the potential directed targeted support or ways of really partnering with us, and that's maybe beyond simply research funding. For remit and eligibility queries relating to very specific grant applications, we have a dedicated grants help desk team, and they're set up to be able to help you through that process. So you can use the contact form on our website, and there's also a phone number and a live chat option, and that's also available from Monday to Friday and the office hours. And of course, if anyone who's not signed up already to our research update newsletter via welcome.org homepage, please make sure you do that. I'll leave it there, and then let's take some questions that may well have come in the last 5-10 minutes.
Thank you, Michael. We're now going to start addressing some of the questions. These have come in through Slido, so thank you to everyone who submitted your questions through that avenue. There are also some of the questions we've received as we've taken our new discovery research strategy out into the research community and began to have some of these conversations. So, we take our first question. So, the first question, I'm going to read this out in case you can't see it on your screen. What are we looking for in applications to the early career schemes? What are we after? I'm going to throw that to Luigi.
Thank you, Tom. That's actually a very interesting question. and it's an extremely broad one. So the best way to answer it probably is to answer another question, which is probably even more fundamental. And the question is, why are we actually interested in early career researchers? And the answer to this is very simple, because you guys are basically the future. You're going to be the leaders of tomorrow, and therefore we really need to take care of you. And that's the reason why we have decided to have this early career scheme. Now, Wellcome, we really want to support the entire path of a researcher, from early on with the early career scheme, and then through your development of independency, and then once you are a fully formed leader. And therefore we have these 3 schemes. Now, through the what kind of community actually Wellcome wants to build is also very important. The early career community has to be as varied as possible, and that's why we want to be open to applicants from from all the possible disciplines, well beyond the ones that we used to fund before. And now let me go back into something which is a little bit more pragmatic and about what we really look into an application. So the very first thing is, how do we define an early career researcher? In that case, we have to make a decision and basically trying to come up with a sort of definition. And we thought that the best way of describing an early career researcher was to basically measure how much time was passed in research from PhD. This is a little bit of an arbitrary measure, and in fact, we realize that we can't really use such a clear-cut approach, and we will use flexibility. Therefore, when you see on our website that we want to have applicants from 3 years from PhD, please bear in mind that this is not that this does not take into account potential breaks that you might have had because of career breaks or because you probably changed discipline. Therefore, there is some flexibility, and we invite you to kind of discuss with us specific cases. But then let's go back and think about what we really look into an early career application. So each application is formed mainly of 3 big parts. The first one is the research proposal, and this one has to be ambitious. And specifically, we go deeper and we say that a research proposal has to be bold, high quality, and creative. We have actually, we understand that these words can be interpreted differently by different people. And therefore, we have actually written quite clearly on our website, what do we mean for each of these words? And we use these criteria to kind of assess all the applications that come in. Then the second big part of the application that we look at is the profile of the applicant. And when we talk about profile, we really try to understand whether the applicant has the right skills and expertise to carry out the proposed research. And of course, with early researchers, we understand that you might not have all the right skills from the get-go. And therefore, what we will be looking at is how you intend to acquire new skills and to further your expertise. And then, of course, there is the third part of the application, which is the research environment you have chosen. And this is an important part because the research environment is what will help you to grow as an independent researcher. And we will look at this as well. And I think this concludes the answer to my question, unless there are other things from the other ones.
Thank you, Luigi. That's a very, very comprehensive answer. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go on to another. And I can also see that questions are coming into the Q&A, so please do keep those coming in. Right, the second question, what is and isn't in remit for discovery research? Maya, do you want to have a go at that?
Thank you, Tom. I will have a go at that. So as Michael has already described, we're aiming for a really broad remit for discovery research. Anything that aims to understand life and health and disease. And this can be hypothesis driven or focused more on developing tools and techniques that will help break new ground and therefore enable new. And we will support this at many career stages from early postdoc all the way through to very seniors. So the things that we would consider out, as Michael has already touched on, would, for example, be clinical trials where that is a simple comparison of is drug A better than drug B for treating hypertension, for example. That doesn't mean that clinical research or even clinical studies are necessarily out of remit if they are more focused on a research question. For example, this drug works in hypertension, but it's not known why. Can we by studying this drug, perhaps even in a clinical study, find out more about this and potentially even a new field? So that would be my kind of quick answer to that. Would anyone like to add anything?
Brilliant, thank you, Maya. So the next question, another big, broad question. What's new in how we're looking at applications? What's novel in our assessments of applications? Morag?
I'm going to start by answering this question by actually saying what's the same and what we're doing the same as we've done previously. And really, we're looking particularly at the early and mid-career stages. We're looking for proposals that set up individuals for success as part of an academic research career. And that remains at the heart of our assessment process. I'm going to touch a little bit on the assessment process and the 3 broad themes that we look at. So the application process is 2 stages. There's first a shortlisting stage, which is by a series of more subject-specific expert panels, and those that are successful at that stage will then proceed to interview, which will be a familiar process to those who are used to applying for Wellcome. At all stages, we look to assess 3 broad components. Firstly, the research proposal. There we're looking, is it bold, creative and curiosity-driven research that has the potential to lead to significant shifts in our understanding of life, health and well-being. We'll also look at the research environment. Here we're looking at this through the lens of both an individual or a team and that of through the institution. So what does the institution, as Luigi said, what does the institution offer you and your career to develop you further? And then from the lens of an individual or a team, we're really keen to understand how you will contribute to the development of a positive research environment at either within your team, your group, or at later career stages broader than that. We'll also look at the applicant or the individual or team themselves. There we'll look at research outputs, the skills, your commitment to development as leadership, as well as your commitment to skills development necessary for the programme. And I think that's sort of a good overview. Would anyone like to add anything?
Brilliant, thank you. We can move on to our next question. And this is one that I've certainly heard a lot when I've gone out there. The transition to a career development award feels like a pretty big jump. Luigi, what advice would you have to someone asking you this question?
I mean, this is a very interesting question, and it's very close to my heart, I have to say. I have loads of friends and colleagues that actually are in that specific career stage. And I think here we need to be clear, probably what's really, the big jump here is not probably applying for a career development award or Wellcome. The big jump is to decide that you want to become an independent researcher. And of course, this will happen to different researchers in different time. Therefore, they should only be taking this huge jump when they feel ready. This is the very first advice that I would definitely give. So regarding the CDA, I think the CDA award, our scheme, is probably one of the best tools to become independent, mainly because it gives you this long time of funding that basically sets your ambition free. We understand that this is probably where the tricky bit starts because you basically have to think about a program of research that could be up to 8 years. And these seem to be scary in few cases, but you also have to think that quite often when we've been out and about asking about what we could do better, one of the main answers that we got was that at this specific stage of your career, you want to have more stability, and probably a longer period of funding could provide this sort of stability. Now, we do realize that 8 years is tough. To kind of come up with a research proposal that could cover all this long time. But what we want to basically tell you is that the hint is really in the name of the award. This is a career development award. Therefore, we do not expect you to come in with a proposal where from day one you have a fully fleshed out group of researchers ready to work on a program. this is an award that will help you develop your research program. Therefore, we will envisage having applications that will be very different in nature according to the type of research that is basically writing it. And therefore, we will probably have some awards that could be even shorter than 8 years, although personally, I don't really see why you wouldn't be using the opportunity to have a longer award. We expect some awards to be kind of quite bulky, full of activities, starting from the first years all the way to the 8th. Others will probably build up these activities and so on. And therefore, although they seem to be scary, I think it's really, they are quite flexible and they can be tailored to the different type of researchers.
Thank you. I think it's really worth reiterating the point. This is about developing your career. Different disciplines, different researchers will have different interests. Maybe it's research independence, maybe it's research leadership or collaboration, which is important to you. I think we have one more commonly asked question. I'm going to throw this one over to Maya. Just a bit of warning there. Does fewer schemes mean fewer opportunities for specific communities?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, that's a question that comes up really often when we go out in the community and discuss with people. People are worried about Wellcome leaving behind these specialized schemes. I think that the hope that we all have is that it will do the opposite, that having fewer schemes that are open to all applicants will enable a more kind of diverse group of people to apply to us. That said, we are aware that there could be problems and bottlenecks for certain groups, and we are monitoring really carefully who is applying, who is successful, who is not, to enable us to develop with this as things go along, to make sure that we are indeed funding as diverse and exciting a portfolio of workers as we can. Would anyone like to add anything to that?
I actually would like to add one thing. It's true that we've kind of reduced the number of schemes, but we actually massively, as Maya said, opened up the breadth of them. And in fact, for example, an example is that previously was very difficult, or there was probably only one scheme at Wellcome to develop, for example, tools and technology. And now we actually opened up the possibility to applications that basically are focused on tools and technology development and this is something that basically will definitely cater for a specific part of the research community that we were probably missing before.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, both. So now we're going to move on to the Q&A, and I can see we've had some really important questions coming in. There's one question which is quite brief and direct. It's got 11 likes already, and that is about directed funding. So this person has asked, bring this back. I think that, Morag, this might be a question for you. Directed activity, we've spoken about how it's going to be an important part of our portfolio, but how do we actually tend to deliver our directed activity?
Thank you. I'm happy to talk about that. I think in the presentation, Michael talked about directed funding and touched upon the targeted catalytic funding, as well as our physical infrastructures and another bucket of sort of institutes and major initiatives. So we will develop specific calls, but we'll also be working, at least in the first instance, working with the research community to really understand what the research challenges and bottlenecks are to delivering significant shifts in our understanding and developing calls or supporting institutions or programs around that.
If I could maybe just add, I think the relationship we have both with the people that we fund, but also with people that we don't fund, is really critical in this. What we don't envisage is sitting in the Euston Road and developing programs of activity that are divorced from the reality of the research environment and the kind of questions that people are asking. So it's very much going to be about structured engagement that we will have with the wider community in the UK and beyond, to really think about some of these really big thorny problems where Wellcome might have a unique role to play. I mean, I think Wellcome as an independent organisation, free of the kind of the political constraints, and can take much longer term view of problems. I think we've got a special place and a special role to play, I think, in what might be kind of catalysing new areas of research. But I think it's very much thinking about how we deliver and develop those ideas with the wider community.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to take on a question which I've seen is very close to my heart. Someone's asked, is social research part of the mix? And the answer is absolutely. If your social research relates to health, life and well-being, the social, cultural, political context, the economic context of health, then it's absolutely in remit. And it doesn't matter how you're doing it. It could be quantitative surveys, it could be ethnography, it could be a series of in-depth interviews. It's going to fundamentally change understandings of health, then it's absolutely part of Wellcome's remit. I've got a kind of rather specific budgetary question here. I'm not sure if it's worth throwing over to Michael. I'm going to read this out. Thank you for posting this. In the past, the science part of the funding, which included our Discover Research categories, was, and we get this right, £862 million. So is it now 350? Well, they've said it. Is it now £350? I think it's somewhat more than that. Can you give us some?
Definitely more than £350, that's for sure. But no, so it is a great question. So discovery research, I guess, first thing to say is it represents kind of the bringing together of the old science and the humanities and social science parts of Wellcome. But as has been mentioned before, also broadening the remit. 350 million is what we spend on our open responsive schemes. That's actually more than we will spend than we spent last year on our open mode. But in addition to that, we have long-term commitments, things like the Sanger Institute, BRIC, the existing UK centres, the overseas programmes, that's our Africa and Asia programmes, and then the PhD programme, the clinical programme, which just kicked off last year. Generally, the overall annual spend does go up and down based on kind of big bumps of activity in a particular year, but the 350 million is just for our open mode.
Thank you, Michael. I can see we've got a few questions about different career journeys. For example, we've got a question here about eligibility for career development. States you should be 3 years post your first independent position, but does that take into account the impact of COVID and that has been felt by different people in different ways? I guess we're thinking about also career breaks, we're thinking about very teaching heavy contracts, and if anyone wants to talk about how we will take that into account in our assessment.
Shall I? Okay.
Morag, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So you're right, we are looking, we have given the guidance on our website about 3 years from your first permanent post, but there are caveats to that, and that does include time spent away from research, which can be due to a number of circumstances, for a career break, maternity leave, or part of illness, and we recognise that COVID will have affected many people in that way. To Tom's point as well, if you've worked part-time or your research was not 100% part of your role, for example, if you're a healthcare professional or you've had a teaching heavy role, these are all examples that we would encourage you to speak to our grants information desk and go through your specific circumstance and receive that advice. I think there was also a question, Tom, on the chat around applicants for career development in low to middle income countries. I don't know whether it would be a good idea to quickly take that now, if that was okay. So we do recognise that actually in low to middle income countries, it is more normal to be appointed to a permanent open-ended position earlier in your research career, and actually that we make exceptions for applicants from low to middle income countries. So again, I would encourage people to speak to our grants inquiry line and go through your circumstances and receive advice on which is the best route for you to apply to Wellcome.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Morag. I can see we've also got a few questions which are about our remit. I guess the big change is we're now open to research from any discipline. We're really excited about engaging with some of those new communities. There's also a question about the balance between fundamental discovery research and applications of that research. So I guess those might be to practice, policy, public understandings. I'm just going to read out sort of the questions we've got in that area. Is it okay to apply to a CDA? Is it okay to apply to our schemes with a proposal on fundamental research that will have direct implications for applied research? This is not in itself an applied study. Maya?
Yes, I think from what I can glean from that question, that sounds like something that would be absolutely up our street.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a clear yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I guess we've got a similar question from, I assume you're from an engineer, when we're looking at those new communities, those new disciplines. It's unclear whether that research needs to focus on addressing Wellcome's long-standing remit about fundamental research into life, health and well-being, or whether we're now more open to more translational discovery research, the example given here being tissue engineering.
Morag, would you like to?
I was very happy to answer that. I think just to build upon what Maya and was saying, that actually DR does support research that may have clinical, societal or translational impact, but it's absolutely critical for us that there is a focus within the proposal that it moves forward our understanding of life, health and well-being. I think to sort of address the question specifically around tissue engineering, the remit of discovery research is twofold, and it is principally to move forward our understanding, and the research itself could lead to new understandings or new insights, but also we are looking to support the development of new tools and methodologies that open new avenues of research. And so I think it's really important for applications such as tissue engineering to be able to consider that framing and to articulate how that will open new avenues of research, both for your group or you as a researcher, but for others in the community as well. Have you got anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think what we're trying to do is broaden our definition of what good questions are, but you do need to have a good kind of question, because I think that where we've tried to land with discovery research is to, as I said, at the beginning, in a world where actually there's ever increasing pressures for people to kind of do things that are much more translational, that we really want to celebrate the exploratory, and to celebrate the exploratory, which may actually have an impact on health in a reasonably short time frame, but it doesn't have to. I think what we probably wouldn't be expecting to see is, expecting an engineer to come in to create a widget which is a treatment, because I think that would be much too far along the kind of the translational pathway compared to kind of the remit for discovery.
Thank you both. An extra question that we're going to really enjoy answering. How you get the required how would you get the required input from the community? Will you be scheduling engagement events? How are we going to get ourselves out there?
Well, getting ourselves out there, I mean, obviously over the last year or so, we've had a number of challenges, not least COVID. And I think it's really very much kind of part of the discovery research team's roles to kind of be the eyes and ears of Wellcome. So not only kind of being ambassadors for Wellcome, but also kind of being able to listen to the kinds of work that you're interested in doing and bring those ideas back. I think some of that will be done, through kind of formal structured engagement, through workshops. Some of it will be through kind of the interactions we will have through advisory bodies that we will set up. Some of it will be through the kind of the ongoing advice and relationships we have with some of the people that we have on our review committees, because I think we could use those folks a lot better in the future and work more closely with them. I think part of that actually is in the long term we are looking to broaden our approach to getting advice. So I think at some point in the near future we will be looking to advertise for roles on our advisory committees and bodies. So I think we definitely are going to be taking a number of different approaches to get that all important input.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michael. I think I speak for the whole department when I say that we are so keen to get back into the research community and have that dialogue again about our ideas and about your ideas as well. We've got a question here which is about climate and health. I think it's a wider question about the relationship between the health challenge areas and discovery research. The health challenge areas will have quite specific calls, there might be quite narrow calls on really important emerging issues. Do we know if there's going to be more calls coming out that speaks to the breadth of research in that area? Or do you think that people with great ideas around mental health, climate and health, or around infectious disease should in fact come to discovery research?
I'd be happy to speak to that. I know that all the challenge areas are thinking about how best to achieve their aims, and that there will be several directed calls. They will usually be quite specific in what they're looking for. And so if you have more of a general idea that relates to one of these areas, as Michael said earlier, your best bet may be to go for a straight up discovery award in whatever kind of scheme that suits your career stage. There will be a lot of announced calls in the health challenge areas, but even if your work is in one of those areas, it may not still fit those particular calls because they will be quite highly engineered.
I think that's right. So for mental health, I mean, mental health is a very, very specific remit of anxiety, depression, and psychosis. You can apply for early career and CDA awards in those areas, and if you're interested in a program of work which is about developing your own research career, for the targeted calls that will come out, there will be very specific endpoints. There'll be less about you kind of following your nose and your own kind of curiosity and your own set of questions. There'll be much more about kind of addressing questions that are set by welcome, if you like. So I think that's kind of that's kind of like a really important difference. But for sure there will be multiple calls coming out as the strategies bed in. I think it's also important to say that if you have a discovery grant or a health challenge grant, it doesn't preclude you from also being potentially a co-applicant or being part of a team grant, or in some cases leading another grant. So in some instances it might be actually an opportunity to have two bites of a cherry.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael. We have about 7 minutes left before we wrap up. I can see the questions are still coming in. Rest assured that we are looking at all of your questions and going to try and respond to as many as we can. We've had one that's just come in, which I think is really important. Don't have a cap on project budgets, but it's probably possible for people to put in budgets that are over ambitious. It can be difficult to predict what you might need for 8 years. Would you have any advice for someone thinking about how ambitious to be with their ask for the money?
Yeah, I can probably answer that question. It is actually a very important one because of course, as you said, we basically want you to be as ambitious as possible, but of course we don't really want to have reckless applications coming to us, and there is a fine line between the two. When you put in an application, you should really be thinking about what do you need to deliver the specific piece of research. And this is a very tough question, and you have to be careful because you really need to think about the answer, because when you're going to go through the review process, our committees will be thinking about value for money for each of the applications. And therefore, although the idea is set your ambitions free, but at the same time, you also have to be reasonable and remember that you work in a research environment, which is most likely the UK or a low-middle income country and so on. So we will basically look at those elements and the value for money of each application.
Yeah, I mean, I think I fully appreciate that it's actually quite difficult for people to kind of calibrate. What we've tried to do is provide what we're trying to do is not kind of artificially constrain people, but at the same time, these are proposals where you're putting together plans for you to develop your career and a set of questions with coherence, where you're going to be set up for success, as Morag said, in the longer term. It's not for setting up a program of such expanse that actually it could be potentially a mini centre or a mini institute. That would not be sensible. But certainly, I think it's about where do you in terms of the resource that you think you can reasonably manage, the kind of numbers of people that you might be able to manage, and actually the tractability and the doability of the problem within a time frame. So it's kind of marrying all of that up together. And I think certainly I would advise people to talk to as many wise heads as possible within their institutions. And certainly I think it's getting kind of good advice from maybe people who have already had welcome grants in the past, I think might be useful.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think this also applies perhaps to duration. I had a few questions about how long to go for. And again, it's about the needs of the research. We're looking to fund longer and larger, and that's going to really suit some kinds of research. But maybe if you're doing highly conceptual research, then you won't have a research vision that takes the full 8 years. On which note, got a nice brief question here: is legal research of interest? Oh yes, the legal context of health and well-being are extremely important, and ethical frameworks of medicine and health research are also extremely important. The thing I would say is the primary contribution of your research should be to understandings of health. The legal research, which incidentally or tangentially has relevance for our understanding of health, is perhaps less likely to be competitive for our schemes. We also have a question about the gap between CDAs and Discovery Awards. We've talked about the gap from early career to career development. Someone said, if you have any advice or what we would say to someone who had a permanent contract but didn't feel that they had yet built up the international standing that we say you might need for a Discovery Award. Any thoughts on this? Morag.
I'm happy to, I think the first reflection is that actually Discovery Awards, whilst it is for established researchers, that actually is quite a big breadth of people at different stages in their research careers. So I would really focus on the research proposal and think about how it would deliver bold and creative research, and would encourage you to apply and think about yourself as an applicant in the context that we will look at people not as a homogenous group, but actually look at the context of where they are in their career when we are the proposals.
I think, for me, I think what we're trying to do is actually close a gap, because I think over the years, certainly since I've been at Wellcome, the length of time people kind of are on soft money before they actually are offered permanent contracts is so long that by the time people kind of get their their first investigator award or whatever we had in the past, that they're actually pretty senior. And I think what we're trying to do is reduce reduce the kind of the length of time that somebody has to kind of wait until they kind of get offered that job. Now I appreciate that this is going to take time to kind of work through the system, and there will be problems and issues, and there will be some universities that will not be so happy about this. But we have to try. This is part of the research culture piece. This is about providing people with more stability and more certainty in their careers, and it's about people with families, and it's all sorts of different things. And it's been a big problem for many years, and we're trying to this is all part of trying to kind of resolve some of these things.
And there is actually another point that we should probably also raise, and this answers one of the other questions that was seen. Sometimes if a researcher is not in the best position to apply for a CDA or a DA, the DA award, the Discovery Award, is also open to teams for team science, and therefore there are scientists probably or researchers that could develop themselves as co-applicant in this type of awards. And this is a route that probably people should be thinking about if they think they don't really have the right standing to be leading at one of our awards.
Brilliant, thank you, Luigi. We're into the final 5 minutes, so we're going to start to wrap up soon. There is a short question here about how to apply as a team. And of course, the Discovery Awards is a great vehicle for that. But perhaps there's another question about the fact that the early career awards and the career development awards are very focused on the career progression of the person leading the research. So what do you think is the role of the team or of a research team in those early career awards, career development awards? I think actually I would.
Yeah, I think Tom, I think you came up with a question.
Yeah.
So career development awards. Projects that come up to large and quite ambitious. There's also a possibility to take on some of the early career awards, but yet is should I be applying if we have a great vision applying. Remember that this is your chance to forward your bold, ambitious researcher. To think about how you're going to develop your skills.
There were a couple of very quick ones I think that I thought might be quite easy. So there was one about what do we mean by health or life, and does it include animal health? And I think quite clearly we are focused on human health. So the only animal health research that Wellcome will support will be if it's of direct relevance to human health. So things like zoonotic infection or anything like that. But veterinary research in terms of kind of animal health is not in remit. And I think there was a question about achievements, such as prior fellowships or grants as kind of like evidence to prove your readiness to lead your own research. I think part of the assessment process has been to move to narrative CVs. It's the resume for researchers, because I think what we're trying to get away from is the idea that we kind of measure or weigh up the number of kind of awards or fellowships or grants that people have had, but actually look to kind of see what they've actually done and actually go a more holistic, rounded view of that. So that might be, in terms of how they've, contributed to their university's diversity and inclusion strategy. It might be how they've worked to steer a particular program of research or a particular area within their institution. I think we want to take a kind of have a broader view of that. Clearly, having successfully secured grants from maybe from previous positions, that can be great, but actually I think we're more interested in kind of what you did with that grant rather than whether or not you actually had one.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to pass back to you to wrap up and give us a sense of next steps. But before that, thank you all so much for joining us and for all of your questions. We're looking forward to seeing your ideas, both what you want to do now and also about your vision for the future. Back to you, Michael.
So thanks very much. I mean, I really hope that you find this session useful. We are going to try to kind of get through all of the questions and be able to respond in due course. As I said earlier on, this is kind of part of a much longer term, wider engagement piece that we think is so important and that we've kind of really been missing. Hopefully useful to you, but also hugely important for us. So please do fill in the feedback form that has been circulated or will be circulated after. That's also really important for us to kind of figure out whether or not actually this webinar in this kind of a format is working, or whether or not we might need to do things slightly differently. Appreciate all of the questions that came through before in the Slido and the questions that have come through today. Sorry we haven't got to them all in the meeting, but as I say, we'll try to get to them all. Please do use the Discovery Research inbox if you've got things that you want to talk to us about that don't relate to specific questions about your grant applications, because that's what you need to kind of use the research funding or the the website for. So without any further ado, thank you very much for your time. Thanks very much to the team, and we look forward to continue the conversation with you all in due course. Thank you very much.